Hey everyone, how you doing? Welcome back to Characters Explained, a series where I cover characters from the game Battle for Neighborville. And in today's video, we're once again covering the controversial healer himself, Scientist. So without any further ado, let's get right into it. So to start out, we need to briefly cover Scientist's background in this franchise, and admittedly, he's one of the fresher faces in this category, at least compared to some other zombies. He first started out in the shooter games, and he was basically the zombie support for the first two games, unless you count Hovergoat. Oh, and he was also technically in PVZ here. Sorry, what game are we talking about? Oh, I don't know, it's just such a snooze fest. Oh, right, heroes. Yeah, nobody cares, moving on. Next up are his basic stats, so let's cover them. Scientist has 100 HP in this game, which matches him up quite nicely with some other characters, such as Sunflower. His primary is the Goo Blaster, and this weapon fires a bunch of smaller projectiles that each deal a tiny bit of damage. Now, due to this amount being just the most annoying thing to calculate ever, we'll simplify the numbers here to what his best potential damage can be per shot, which is 31.24 if all 11 pellets connect. That accounts for crits too, so yeah, sorry, BFN made shotguns so tediously difficult to get good numbers on, so to put it simply, he does good damage. That's where we're gonna leave it at. Oh, and his shots also come out in the pattern of an atom. That's pretty cool. This primary has 10 ammo, and the rate of fire is 90. So his primary might be a little bit complicated, but all you really need to know is that it's capable of some pretty good damage, though you should treat it like a shotgun because otherwise you're going to be hitting like 10 damage. With that being said, now we can move on to his abilities, so let's cover those next. First up is Sticky Healy Thingy, which kind of does exactly what it says on the tin. It can stick to teammates and enemies, as well as most grounded surfaces, and it heals the area it covers around 90 HP over a course of 3 seconds. It's pretty basic stuff we're working with here, but this ability is very useful if you need to heal someone or yourself quickly. Next up is Warp, which teleports you in any direction that you're moving in via controller input or key input 15 meters. And before you ask, yes, you can spam this ability if you need to. This version of Warp is honestly really good, especially since you get 3 in this game. If you're going to use anything in his kit, then this should be that thing. Finally, we have Healing Hose, which heals teammates at a rate of 20.85 HP per second. This ability has no cooldown and can be used for as long as you'd like. You can also heal multiple teammates within the radius of the hose if you use it properly, which is pretty nice. Now, despite these insane stats, you also have to consider how you can't attack or run while using the ability, so healing comes at a cost. But overall, this is what makes Scientist a healer, and without it, who knows where he'd be. So that is Scientist's basic kit. There's not much to look at here, but that doesn't mean that we're done yet. Oh no. Next, we'll be covering his upgrades, so let's get into those now. Scientist has a lot of interesting upgrades in this game. I don't really know how to explain it to you besides showing it, so let's dive in, shall we? First up are his base upgrades, and starting off this list is Evolution. This upgrade is relatively simple. When equipped, Scientist is given max normal overhealth when he first spawns in for 20 seconds before it starts to decay. So overall, you can have at least some overhealth for around 30 seconds, give or take. It's a really simple upgrade, but if you're an aggressive player, then this might be the one for you. Next up is Precision, which basically reduces the spread on your primary by over 58% when you're aiming. This upgrade is also pretty simple, but I'd argue that it's even more useful than the last one, especially if you play in the backlines a lot. I highly recommend trying this upgrade out if you haven't already. It's really good. Up next is Reflexive, which gives you 12.5 HP back per second whenever you heal allies. This upgrade is one of those ones where you can imagine how broken it is by just reading it. And yeah, it's pretty busted. Finally, we have Dolphin Blasting, which is one of those rate of fire increase upgrades. This one works whenever you get an elimination, and it stacks up to 3 times. It'll continue to give you a rate of fire increase for an additional 15 seconds, and that's about it. As for the numbers, 1 Vanquish makes your rate of fire go to 103.5, 2 makes it go to 117, and finally, 3 and above reaches up to 144. This upgrade is overall a really good one, and paired up with something like Combat Aura, it makes you a DPS nightmare. Next up are his ability upgrades, so let's start out with Sticky Healy Thingy. First up here is Reanimate, which makes you revive twice as fast if you and your down teammate are inside the ability. Yikes. Moving on. The other upgrade is Diffusion, which increases the size of your healing thingy whenever it sticks to an enemy or teammate. In particular, the healing radius is actually doubled here, and that's pretty neat. It's still pretty expensive for the choice you're making, but it's alright regardless. Next up are the warp upgrades, and these ones are good. Wormhole is first, and this upgrade increases your warp distance, now up by 80%. That is pretty insane, I gotta be honest. Though I'll admit that this upgrade can be a double-edged sword if you're not being careful. You could like teleport too far and jump in the ocean or something. Yeah, I don't know, it's hard to make it seem bad, but trust me, if you're like me, then you will frick up. It's overall a good upgrade, just don't be dumb. As for Materialize, this upgrade gives you 5 ammo back whenever you use Warp. This is a fine enough upgrade for Reg Scientist, but it really excels with Steam Blaster, which is an upgrade that I'm not covering here. Look, if you need to know anything, just know that it's decent and can be useful in some situations for Reg. Finally, we have the Healing Hose upgrades, and these are pretty good too. CPR is first, and this upgrade doubles your healing output whenever the target you're healing is at low HP. It's basic, but very effective. The same can be said about Power Wash, which increases your range and reduces the spread of the hose when you're aiming. And before you ask, yes, you can aim while using this ability. Weird. Anyways, this upgrade can be useful to anybody who wants to stay back while healing a teammate that's getting bombarded. So it does have its uses. So that is pretty much all of Scientist's upgrades. Overall, he's got a pretty decent bunch here. And with that being said, now we can cover some example builds I made. So let's get into those next. First up is my personal build using Dolphin Blasting and Combat Aura. Yes, I am an Aggro Scientist player, how could you have guessed that? Next up is a healing build using Reflexive, CPR, and Power Wash. This is about as good as it gets regarding healing, and I'd recommend trying this build out in Giddy Park for no particular reason. Moving on. Finally, we have a warp-centered build using Critical Blow, Wormhole, and Materialize. Want to annoy your enemies? Well, this'll probably get that done. So with all of that information out of the way, now we can get into my personal thoughts about this character. And honestly, Scientist is pretty good. Excluding the healing part, he's honestly really solid, and I would recommend trying him out if you haven't already. You might be surprised at how much fun you have with him. And with that being said, I'm going to be ending this video here. Thank you all so much for watching until the end, I really do appreciate it. And let me know, how do you feel about Scientist in BFN? Do you think he's good, or do you consider him to be on the mediocre side? Tell me your thoughts and more in the comments down below. And if you're new around here and you like what you saw, then maybe consider subscribing too. It helps me out a ton. Now, as for me, I've got some warping of my own to attend to. So I'll see you guys on my next video. Peace.